Fred Joyal is the co-founder of 1-800-Dentist, and he's widely recognized as the industry's leading authority on dental marketing. Fred has very strong opinions on the needs for patient financing. Here's a quote from his second book, Becoming Remarkable, Creating a Dental Practice Everyone Talks About. If you are looking for new patients, understand that one of the first considerations is that you offer financing. In addition to Becoming Remarkable, he also wrote the best-selling Everything is Marketing, the Ultimate Strategy for Dental Practice Growth. And over the past 31 years, Fred has worked directly with thousands of the most successful dental practices in the country. On the topic of patient financing, we have our guest expert, Bette Johnson, who's the Senior Vice President for Care Credit, the nation's leading patient financing program. She is a veteran sales, marketing, and practice management professional who's been a key member of the Care Credit team since 2001. Recognized as one of the top 25 women in dentistry, Bette works with many consultants, professional organizations, and educational institutions across the United States. And through her engagement with dental professionals, she provides the opportunity to network and create new relationships that benefit the dental profession. She believes that today, more than ever, patient financing is a necessity, a tool that enables patients to get the care they need now instead of delaying or compromising treatment. I would now like to welcome Fred and Bette.
Hi, everybody, and hi, Bette. It's great to have you on the show.
Thrilled to be here. Absolutely thrilled.
And one of the reasons I'm so excited to have you on, Bette, is it's more than just your business expertise. I know what the tools are that you have and how much data on consumer behavior you have with regards to patient financing. And sort of 800 Dentists, we come from a lot of the data about consumer marketing, but nobody has the information like you have about patient financing behavior and how to capitalize on that. So I want to get into some real nuts and bolts stuff. Everyone listening, you're going to really hear some interesting things about how people behave, what percentage of them tend to do one thing versus another, which many times is not what we believe, and then also how to effectively capitalize on patient financing. And first of all, we're one of the few industries that worries so much about financing, about talking about it. I mean, the car industry doesn't have this problem. Best Buy doesn't have this problem. Apple doesn't have this problem. We're hung up about that. And Bette, why do you think that is?
Well, first off, Fred, I think there's a lot of stigmas in dentistry. We worry about being salespeople. And so we worry about that when in actuality sales is merely the ability to serve someone. And financing, we shouldn't talk about, that's pretty private, but at the same time we have to remind ourselves we're in business. With your permission, Fred, just a quick story, if you don't mind, about why I have a need for patient financing, and it's very personal because, you know, I've actually worked in practice for a couple of years, but I want to tell a story real quickly about a patient. This patient was a very talented person when they were in their youth. At age 13, you know, they were invited to go to Juilliard in the future, later on in life, because of her ability to sing. She was even given a seat in the tabernacle choir. And of course, her life progressed on. She had children. But I will tell you, there was a sadness in this woman. She, at age 28, she became a dentalist. And she was a very proud woman. And being in music and out in front of people, you never saw her without her teeth. But that was the best she could do. She had children, and as she progressed in life, around age 40, she had to go to a prosthodontist because the bone had so resorbed in her mouth that her denture was floating around. And by the time she was 55, the prosthodontist wasn't making her very comfortable, and she had become very reclusive. And there was no singing. There was no music in her life. She had pretty much not being very social anymore, and by age 60, she was eating out of a blender. So when I talk about this woman, I know this woman very well because this woman was my mother.
Oh.
So I came into dentistry. I learned about implants. My husband and I, We didn't have a lot of money, but I did know about patient financing because they were using it in the practice. And my husband and I, this was something we were able to give a gift to my mother. And, you know, Mother's Day was just last weekend. And I will tell you that the woman at age 95 led the chorus on Mother's Day at her church.
Wow.
She got back her life. She got back everything due to what dentistry does. So, yes, I believe very powerfully that patient financing is a game changer in life.
Yes, because it's about getting it done versus not getting it done. We're gonna talk a lot about, you know, I part of what I understand is that this dentistry is paid for differently than other healthcare, and that's the challenge for people when they walk into a dental office. They're not budgeting for dentistry, and yet they walk into a dental practice, and we've got this slide here where we're talking about how big dentistry is. Dentistry, you know, did $123 billion in 2015, and it grows 2 or 3% a year. But 77 billion of it was insured, but 46 billion of it was out of pocket. That's very different than healthcare, and it means these people have to figure out how to come up with the money beyond what the insurance covers. And what's interesting is less than 10% of it is able to be financed or by care credit, just because people aren't utilizing the service. And, you know, the other number that's really important that we're going to talk about is how much work isn't getting done, isn't getting started. This is the work that's getting done, and it's important for people to realize the ratio here of how much money has to come out of pocket to take care of their teeth. And your mom's a perfect example. Is she couldn't get to it.
Well, here's the other part, Fred. You just hit the most important part. I love the fact that we can say that we did $123 billion. I love the fact that I did well over $4 billion in financing. That's a lot of people's lives changed, but you hit it right on the head. The critical part of this is what was diagnosed that never got scheduled, that is sitting out there because they were never offered the opportunity to make payments as they do in everything else in their life, right?
Yep. And so it affects their decision making. It affects how they decide what they're going to do when it's presented to them. Because we have many dentists who are presenting what they know is necessary treatment, not even, you know, high-end optimal, you know, cosmetic or something like that, but it's like, this is what you need to get done. And the drum I beat with dentists a lot of times that they, you know, you brought up the word selling, because selling is really just communication with a purpose. And when you have something good, something important, and that consumer doesn't understand the value, then we have to effectively communicate. We have to sell the value to them for their own benefit. And so they're making decisions based on what they can afford to do or what they think they can afford to do, or worse, what they think the insurance covers. But that's another issue. We'll get into that in a bit. But Care Credit's done a significant amount of data, and I want you to talk about some of this stuff, that the decision-making process and what's involved in the time in particular for a patient.
Yeah, absolutely, Fred. You know, it's kind of funny. Data is just proof of a great story, and the numbers really, truly never lie. So when we talk about the dental care purchase decision process, there was a survey done. Yes, Care Credit commissioned it, but it was not done by us, so that it was not by us. Get it? So
yes.
The survey was done by Rothstein Tauber, and we're getting ready to update this, by the way, because it proved to be so valuable to our profession that we went after to update the data. So that will be out soon, shortly. But this particular information was done in 2015. And we learned from this information that the average patient was taking between about 69.8 days to make a decision on their health care, what was offered to them from the practice. Now, it was all of health care, what I'm saying is, but this was specifically the 69.8 days is relevant to dentistry. So they processed it down for the dental profession. And we uncovered that there was really 5 steps that these patients were taking. And remember, these are not necessarily people that had care credit. These were people that didn't have care credit. So 69.8 days, you know, I know practices that don't track out outstanding treatment until the patient comes in for their next 6-month visit, potentially.
Right.
What they don't
this
realize,
is the average, too. Some people are taking way longer, and some people are deciding fairly soon. But the 70-day average is you know, that's not today. You know, that's not same day.
No, it's not. And you know what's funny, out of their 5-step process, most of it could have been eliminated if the practice had had some really good systems in place. I think systems really help communication in a team and everything else. But here's the deal. They research treatment options. They're researching, they have ideas, because today's patient is getting hit by media. They see commercials for same-day dentistry. They see commercials for Invisalign. They see all different kinds of commercials. I just recently saw one on getting an implant placed on the TV. They're actually researching things before they come into the practice with an expectation of something that they want. And the funny thing is, because they researched it when they went in and it's not congruent with what the practice says, or the practice can't answer the answers, they go back and they talk to family, they talk to Dr. Google, they find out about finances, they do all these things to delay treatment, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, it actually stages out a process where if there was trust built in the practice, if there was value built in the practice, and there was a way to pay for it, because, hey, when we can't afford something, it's like, hey, I know I need it, but I can't pay for it right now. So what do? I wait. You know, I don't really have another option. You know, my transmission fell out of my car and I don't have the money for a new one. So I'm going to take the bus for a little while. You know, it's the same sort of thing. But if they, and there's a side bit to this that's kind of important. If the patient is delaying treatment because of a lack of financing option, or worse, because a financing option wasn't presented that the practice actually had, they may actually go to another dentist because they go online and say, I need a dentist who offers financing, and they find a website where the dentist is very clear about what financing options are and that they can maybe even apply on the website. They lose the case. The patient goes to some place where they can get the treatment financed because they didn't think their doctor did it.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later. But you know, we also know, incongruent with this slide, you talked about the dental care purchase decision process. On our next slide that we have, we talk about that of this survey, we found that 52% of the dental patients surveyed, well, they weren't aware that financing was even an option. So more than half of the practices that, you know, the patient was thinking about it, they were waiting that time period, they didn't even know financing was available. They had to find it out. And I find that to be a very big indicator that the practice doesn't have their systems in place. They're doing selective choosing of who they talk to, about what they talk to, and maybe not what doctor's vision is at all. And I think that's something that's easily, very quickly changed in a practice. You know, 69% of Americans today have less than $1,000 in their savings account. Well,
I just saw a statistic today that we've hit $12 trillion in household financing in the U.S. It's the highest it's been since right after the recession. There's another thing that I think you have a statistic as well about 50% of Americans have less than a certain amount of room on their credit cards. What's that number?
It's $500. $500 of available credit on their credit card. So, you know, and those credit cards, those are interest bearing. Those are things that are not patient, what I would call patient friendly products. And realizing that we're asking them many times for $2,500 treatment plans. That's our first
they can't make a dent in it with a $500 limit, and that limit, if they get a $500 limit, that's for emergencies. You know, that's for stuff that they have to deal with that they don't have the money for. They don't see dentistry necessarily as urgent as other things may be. And you know, another point you make here is that, of course, uh, the more out of pocket they have to come, the more they're going to be interested in how they can spread these payments out because they don't have the money.
Right. Well, Fred, and just to add one more item to that thought process, in that survey, patients wanted to be offered financing as low at starting at $200. Believe it or not. Obviously, as it rose up, that the cry was, but they had an expectation. It shouldn't really surprise any of us. I mean,
No.
even your smartphone today is required. You finance that. When you leave the Target store, the one thing the clerk is able to articulate very clearly is she has no problem saying, would you like to put that on your Target card today and save 5%? They have no problem with it. But like you said, we need to get over that so that as our profession leaps into the future, and we're talking about why the decision process when I need it, I want it now. Come on. Amazon's growing, flourishing up, proves that they want it now. You go to any kind of you can go online, you put your finger on a picture, and you can order it right then and there on the number of websites. So when they need it and they want it now, why would we not have it available from now? We have the technology. We have the ability to do things. We no longer have to have that conversation that doctor's prepping that tooth today, and oh, by the way, 2 weeks later we'll seed it. But I think you will agree with me, the number one thing that has to change when we do that is the systems have to be put in place, and communication has to be nothing more than on par. Otherwise, they will go back to waiting the 69.8 days.
I think the essence of everything we're talking about can almost be boiled down to the patient has an expectation of financing, not just an interest in it. That they're at that point in their whole lives where they go, okay, if I'm coming out of pocket for anything over a couple $100, what's the financing option? And so, they are, as this next slide shows, they're interested in some other way of financing it besides their own credit card. That's almost half of them are ready to use a healthcare credit card. That's a big deal. That's a lot of production. That's the untreated diagnosed dentistry is an enormous number in this country.
Well, and you also have to look at our millennials. I'm not picking on our millennials. I love our millennials more than anything. They grew up with financing be a part of their world. It was commonplace. It was not new, just as their technology is not new to them. And these millennials, our millennials are, almost 37. And you're talking about a group that likes their money to work for them. They like their money. They like to hold on to it. But they also like their money to work for them. And they are big proponents of patient financing and deferred payment plans. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the other point you make here is that particularly if you're using something like CEREC or to do crowns in a single visit, when you offer that, you want to be able to say, we can get this all done in one visit and have it paid for. And they go, well, how am I going to pay for it? So it adds to the appreciation of same-day dentistry, and all the more important to bring it up because now you're completing the case in that afternoon.
Absolutely. Quick story. I'm going to use my own son. He's going to hate that, but he is a millennial, and he's very savvy with his money. I will give Justin great kudos. Savvy guy with his money, but he's one of those guys. He just went to, get his eyes checked, and he says, well, I have two choices with you I'd like to discuss. He said, I can pay for it in cash, and if you have a financial courtesy, I'll take advantage of that, or I would like to do some patient financing. He offered it up to the office. Now, funny enough, they had already planted that seed before he got there. It wasn't that he showed up and started. The seed was planted on the phone and on the website before he ever got there, so he had already researched it. Likewise, he went to the dentist the other day, and the dentist didn't even bring it up. And I said, "What the heck, Justin? Your mother's is passionate about dentistry." And he goes, "I know, but he didn't offer it. It's obviously not important." That was a big message for me because it wasn't offered. It wasn't important.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. That's equating it. in essence, it devalues the dentistry. It's like, oh, this is something you should do, not something you ought to do. And you know, and I know this from even not as a dentist, but in my decades of doing this, is that there's no clinical advantage to putting off dentistry. So when we let them do it, we're not helping them. When we let them put it off, we're not. There's no upside to this except they didn't come out of pocket and they didn't have to find the cash. But that's not a real upside. So
absolutely.
So let's talk about how you can grow your production. How would you capitalize on the fact that you have financing?
Well, first and foremost, you know, this isn't new news. This isn't the how-to, and there's a lot of people that will tell you what should be on your website and everything else. I will tell you that website becomes more important than it ever has been before, and it can't be cut and paste pictures. It should truly be a reflection of your business. If you have CAD/CAM services, if you have Xerox machine, if you have Invisalign, if you have financing, those things need to be on your website. And oh, by the way, they need to be articulated through, you know, through testimonials. And oh, by the way, make sure your team is shown. People want to see these things. They want to know who you are. And by the way, keep it updated too, because it does you no good to show everything and they walk in and it's not even the same place. So websites are very, very top of mind, very top of mind. Remember I said, of those people that go to the dentist today, they're looking at their practice, even if they've been a part of their practice for years and years and years, they are going and looking at their website before they go to their doctor. Team preparation. I know I said it, but team preparation in the communication is more important than ever before. I was recently talking with a consultant, and she was having a real struggle getting this team to communicate well, and they said they didn't have a problem yet. None of them were speaking from the same story. And so they all had to write down every question that was given to them by a patient for an entire month. On weekly meetings, they would discuss what the questions were to see what people's answers were. How important is it for you to be able to talk about patient financing from the front to the back office? It does no good if the doctor says, oh, by the way, you need these specific procedures done. When the doctor leaves the operatory, she looks at the assistant and she says, what do you think? And she'll say, oh, I've heard it before.
Yeah. Or you know, you don't have to get to that right now. Or if they turn to the assistant and say, I can't afford that, and she goes, I know, right. There's no rush. You don't have to do it today.
But, right. Well, when she said, I can't, you know, is this going to be expensive? How beautiful for her to be able to transition that question well. So if you want to increase your production, I will tell you right now, get that system done. Anything from answering the phone and practice. Oh my goodness, all these years of speaking and being introduced to people, Fred, I still practice. I know that sounds crazy, but I practice. One of the ways I practice is I get in an elevator and I have to engage somebody in a conversation before we get to the bottom floor. Now that may be annoying, but even at this stage in my life, I am still practicing, right?
Well, there's a right way to say stuff that is effective communication. It's not what we want to say or what we think we're getting across. It's what they understand. And that means you have to refine the words that you use. And you have to get comfortable with first offering it up, but then also there's a right way to say stuff. And it's not a secret what that is. I mean, you guys teach that. That's part of it. And you know, there's so many ways that you can let the patient know, and you should be doing all of them. You know, there's the verbal and there's the digital and all of that. And it's, you know, as you say, create an awareness of options anywhere that they are. There's an awareness that is being offered. So if they're in a position where they have to bring it up, at least they got some familiarity with it. Hopefully that the patient isn't the one bringing it up, but certainly they've been prompted by the website and everywhere else that they come in contact with information about the practice. Every situation here that we're talking about on the screen here is an opportunity to say, we're trying to make this treatment that you need affordable so that you can get to it, so that you can enjoy the benefits. And I try to remind dentists of this too, is that when you have a patient who's walking around with diagnosed uncompleted treatment, they're not bragging about your practice. The only ones bragging about your practice are the ones who've gotten the positive result. The work is finished and they're happy that they got it done and got it behind them, or that their smile looks great. But a lot of times, just to get the root canal and the crown done and not have to be thinking about it anymore, or thinking about how they're going to handle it, how they're going to pay for it, now that's a happy patient who's talking about you in social media. They're reinforcing, and as you say, you want them on your website with a review that says, "I'm so glad I went to this practice, and they got me started right away, and I got this treatment done, and they financed it so I could get all done right away, and I couldn't be happier." If somebody reads that and goes, "Oh, financing, yeah, I got to remember that." So all of these places are important.
Yeah, Fred, first off, all these places are important. How easy does it make your conversation when it's finally time to have the financial conversation? If they've already been prompted by all these areas, it takes the burden off of the front office manager and or the treatment coordinator or whoever. I'd like to refer just really quickly back to, Futuredonics put out this report of the changing role of the dental office manager. And more than 50% of the office managers, they were very, very frustrated. Their biggest concern was making sure their chair time was full, and that that training was going forward, and that marketing was going forward. Patient financing is about all of that. It's getting their chair time full. And oh, by the way, if anyone hasn't read that particular report, it's dynamic. It's incredible. Fred, your organization did a fabulous job of that. But more to the point, how easy is it for me to have a conversation when all the visuals, all the communication has happened before they actually sat down and had to have that conversation where the rubber hits the road?
Yeah, and so let's talk about this actual discussion, how you get to it, and what are some of the best ways to get to that and get it across, and what are the tools that are available to them. So I'm going to let you handle this, because I know that Care Credit has mastered this and refined this to just an incredibly successful level.
Well, I actually wrote an article about this, so it's kind of funny because communication and the conversation, as I said, I relate it to my own experience and people not talking about treatment with patients. Sometimes I put it into 3 different segments. There are a lot of offices that are reactive, meaning the patient finally calls them back and says, you talked to me about that crown tooth, and we were going to watch it. Not quite sure what we were watching, but we were going to watch it. And, I have the same there. I still can't afford it, but, I'm in trouble here. And all of a sudden the person says, we have some patient financing available for you. Would you like to take advantage of that? Well, that's pretty reactive, don't you think? We could have solved the problem, not been watching, and not got our patient before it was a big problem and potentially more expensive. We have a lot of reactive offices, unfortunately, Fred. They wait till the very end to offer patient financing. And then we have our offices that I say are selective. You may identify with these. These are the people that know their patients. I know what my patients need. I'm very familiar with this area. And they won't offer them because they think they have means, or they think they know what they want. I used to work in a practice where we saw some very affluent patients, and I will tell you, they are so primed to take advantage of these things. In fact, some of them want you to bill them with their account, which means I was going to be chasing money forever and ever. And I said, I would be happy to bill with your account, and we'll be putting it on Care Credit. So selectively offering it to people is not great. It's not a great idea, because you don't know what you don't know. I will tell you, I have sisters, and they all have beautiful homes, and I talk to them, quite frankly, on a regular basis. But I'll tell you, as well as I know them, I could not tell you what they could afford when it comes to dentistry. Couldn't even come close to it. And that's somebody that I know and as a member of my family. The best
you don't know what they've reserved to spend on dentistry. You don't. And hey, some people's habit is I finance everything. I make $200,000 a year and I finance everything. That's their behavior, And then there's other people that go, I got a family of 4 that I'm supporting with $50,000 and I finance everything too. And the dentist is trying to decode this, to make sure if I don't need to finance it, maybe I won't bring it up. And it's like you're trying to read the tea leaves on this person, and it's, as you say, it is the way somebody dresses, what they drive. None of that stuff is a real indicator of what they're willing to spend out of pocket versus finance.
Well,
and so what the proactive offer is obviously the game, right? Is the practices.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie. Remember, I said they tell a story, and the proactive offers. Okay. Proactive offers are also that get to the heart of the why. There's these questions that we always magically are supposed to ask patients, but the truth is really understanding their why. Why are they willing to go through with the dentistry? There's this thing that happens in the back office that Dr. Wonderful explains all the great things they're going to do, and then they walk this, dead man walking mile up to the front area where they're going to have a conversation, and they lose all the information that doctor goes out of their head, and we have to proactively reestablish what their why was, what they heard from the doctor, and proactively look to and seek to solve their concerns. Proactive means I don't wait to offer patient financing. I offer all of my options. Obviously, I always say cash is king. If somebody wants to take care of cash, take it and run with it. If they want to do Visa, MasterCard, excellent. But don't wait until they say, I can't afford, or I have to think about it, or anything else before you ask the simple question. Would you like to be interested in monthly payments? I have interest-free. Would that be something you'd like to take advantage of? And that's proactive. That's not waiting for the patient to say, hey, can you bill me?
And again, you're saying, I have this interest-free financing. That's not a bad thing to bring up. There's nothing to be embarrassed about there, and there's nothing unappealing about that idea. There's sort of I would like that. So, and so when you talk about it, it's important too, isn't it? It's how and where is become critical. So you've told me some interesting things, and I want you to tell our audience.
Well, privacy is best. I don't ever want to. Well, I'm going to give an example. Have you ever, Fred, been somewhere with your credit card and you were swiping your credit card and it was declined? And through no fault of your own, your credit card company thought it was fraudulent because you were in another part of the country, but for whatever reason, it's embarrassing. I was embarrassed and I had no reason. I knew that my credit card was fine, but it's embarrassing. Financial conversations do need to be in a private place. And I know sometimes private places in a practice can be difficult to find, but you need to really look at your facility, look where you might be able to have that conversation so a patient feels really open to reveal what they're really thinking. And they're not going to do that with everybody standing around them. The second part is, I know that sometimes a lot of offices are offering patient financing in a chair in the back office. They've got their bib on, they're laid back, and they don't have any place else to have that conversation. Please, 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 the minimum that you should do is take that bib off, put the patient upside, get knee to knee with them. That's why upright is best, is because here's the deal. Patients today, if they feel that they are in the operatory and they're having a financial conversation, they will even say they felt that they were under duress. They had no choice. And that's the last thing your practice needed as a patient. And also, it's not a great referral either, because the patient will come up and say, I had no choice. He had me in the chair. What was I going to do? Right? That's not what we're about. So, and you know what? Visual aids. A story is so much painted by what they own and see on their own. It's very silly. I mean, with all the selfies and everything people take today of themselves, you really think they don't want to see and own what's going on in their own mouth? What better commitment can you have than to be able to have the visual of a patient? Then they own their own problem. Practice doesn't have to work so hard.
Yeah, and I think privacy is interesting because, of course, we have HIPAA that half of our offices are giant HIPAA violation environments anyway, because the way we work in an open environment. And so that perception of privacy is as important as the actual privacy. Do they think somebody can hear them? Nobody wants to say they need financing, probably, or or be overheard saying that's what they need. So they go, no, you know, I can afford it. I just don't want to do it right now because they think somebody in the other office already heard them or whatever. But I really think I want to reiterate the importance of making sure that the patient doesn't feel they're under duress in this conversation about money. And if you can take them into another room, great. If you can sit them upright and take off the bib so that they're not being treated in their mind. The cues that say I'm being treated have been changed so that you're really just, they're sitting in a comfortable chair facing you. Such an important message. I want to really drive that home to people because it means that they can challenge potentially the acceptance of treatment at some point, and that's something you'd never want. You don't want them to feel that way. But above all, you want them to feel comfortable in the conversation.
Absolutely.
And so so how do they choose? How do they pick somebody who is going to help them finance offer financing? I mean, that's the question, because Care Credit is fairly widespread at this point, and fairly well known. And I think that even patients at this point, patients know a lot about Care Credit very often too, right? Because it spans beyond just dentistry, right?
Well, so here's the thing. Why choose Care Credit for patient financing? Well, first and foremost, Fred, you know, they wouldn't have me if they didn't choose Care Credit. So, you know, that's a pretty important part. No, there's a number of reasons that when you look at how you go to patient financing, first and foremost, what do they provide? How long have they been in business? I will tell you today that we are literally seeing, if not once a week, once a month, another patient financing product coming into the market. Unfortunately, most of these are not true patient financing, meaning at the end of the bill, if the patient doesn't pay, who owns the debt? Does the practice own the debt, or does a bank own the debt? So I always like people to be very cautious when they're looking at that. Are they providing, is that patient financing organization providing any benefit to that practice? Well, of course they are. They're financing the patients. But here's the thing. I have a network of well over 10 active card holders. Let me explain that. Yes, we are in vision. We have we're in audiology, weight loss, so many different fields. And the beautiful part about that is dentistry is the winner of the fact that they will enroll in Care Credit. They go to the Care Credit website because they have a great experience with us. They find another doctor from our website, believe it or not, that has Care Credit, and they go in. We call this cross shop in the Care Credit world, meaning they started at the veterinarian office and then they ended up in the dental chair. Last year, that was over $400 million that was pushed into dentistry, meaning patients that walked in the door being able to pay. Repeat business, meaning I didn't just see Bette Johnson because she has Care Credit. I also got to see her husband, who, by the way, just had a lot of dentistry done, and I get to see her family members. That's the value proposition of Care Credit. You don't have to keep going after and getting another loan and another loan. You know, the whole thing about over 100,000 dental offices. I can't tell you how many times a referring practice is grateful that not only were they able to get the implant done, but the crown done because they had financing available to them. That is a revolving line of credit, something that Care Credit has done since its inception. You look at 1,500 people dedicated to supporting our practices, and you know, we hear it from, I hate to keep stressing the patient, but the patient to us is a card holder, so forgive our banking terms. The patients are talking about us. They like us. Over 90% of them would refer us to somebody else that they know. Happy to talk about it. So that you want to talk about marketing for your practice? Happy patients. Happy patients refer. And Care Credit, like I said, I have been hugged. I checked into the Paris Hotel in Las Vegas several years ago, and the woman came around the counter, and she hugged me and thanked me because we had done her son Smile, who had lost his front teeth in a surfing accident. You know, I'm very proud of what we provide as a service, and I will also tell you I'm very proud that at the end, the doctors don't own the debt. We're a non-recourse program. So, yeah, I'm very proud of what Care Credit brings to the table. And oh, by the way, since our inception, our processing fees, we have not raised our fees to the doctor. They are the right fee. They permit us to stay in business as opposed to so many businesses, patient financing companies that come into the space and they don't have longevity. It's you want longevity in your practice. You don't want to have.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to brand your practice, I mean, you're going to, let's say, mention Care Credit as financing on your website, which you should, or mention your financing in general. You want something that's still going to be there, but also, you know, practices don't need to learn new stuff and new systems. They need to learn the systems that are going to be around and work indefinitely. And of course, when people call 1-800-DENTIST, one of the first things that we tell the patient when we talk about the practices is that they offer Care Credit, that they offer financing, because people calling us are many times they're the procrastinators and the avoiders who are great patients who haven't really thought about the expense of dentistry. And when they go, oh yeah, that's important to me, that this is a practice that does financing, I'm probably going to want that. You know, we're very comfortable being able to tell that patient that the practice accepts Care Credit because we know that they're more likely to show up in the office. That's a challenge always for us. And you know, and also the other thing that is very true is the way Care Credit is endorsed by organizations, and a lot of people think that's a rubber stamp sort of thing, and it's really not at all, is it?
Well, here's what I would say to this, because it's kind of been a little bit of my life's work, and that was being so passionate about dentistry, knowing that the mouth is the gateway to overall health and wellness. I am very passionate about it, and I will say this. When you have these kinds of endorsements, it's because of due diligence, meaning I dot the I's, I cross the T's. I can't make up a story. I have to tell the truth because these people are the watch guards of the industry, and I have to perform. But more importantly, I'm happy about that. You know, if you're a part of the fabric of a profession, you know your life work is well done. And that's what these represent to me. They represent that we are part of the fabric, whether it be the education, whether it be the patient that smiles, whether it be the doctor's practice that is more profitable and because his chair time is filled with paid-for dentistry. All of those things are part of what this slide means to me.
Well, and beyond that, this is banking. You know, there are all sorts of requirements, regulations, detailed regulations, and risks involved. Just as a dentist who tries to finance things himself, of course, he finances a patient himself or herself. The risk is all on them at that point, and you know, and even if they're using some service sometimes that looks like the risk is being passed off, many times the end point is still them, and they may be facing some regulatory violations on top of it. I try to caution dentists about, like, if it sounds really good or maybe too good to be true and way better than Care Credit, are you sure that that's what you want to be doing? Because there's a reason why Care Credit exists and functions the way it does and has the utilization it does. And the risk is moved off of you because you've done everything and you've done it the way it's required to be to keep the dentist from being at risk. Well,
Fred, we don't walk in the gray. Do you really want your banker walking in the gray? Do you really want to be a banker in your practice and know that you know, and someone will say, well, I'm just a small businessman. I really don't have to know what the fair lending laws or what risk and compliance. As I said, you really don't want those tests. We have to take them all the time. You know, so that we're making sure that we're dotting the I's and crossing the T's. People count on us for that. You're right. There are a lot of companies that say, well, we don't have to do those things. Yes, they do. I want you to know, so does the doctor. If he's going to play businessman, play banker, he's got to follow the rules too. Now, do you want your staff to spend their time doing that, becoming a banker, or do you want to have a partner that is able to provide resources for you that permit you to make sure that you're dotting your I's, crossing your T's, and that it's taken care of for on your behalf? I would much rather my team had conversations about increasing our protection, taking care of our patients, our recall, activation, all of those things. Do I really want them sitting making calls? I want you to know that collection calls are very stressful. Very, very stressful. I know, I've done them. And oh, by the way, a few years ago, many years ago, that's one of the benefits of me being around Care Credit forever. I get to be a bit of a historian. We tried programs in the market where it was 100% financing. 100% financing. We couldn't afford them, Fred. The fallout was heinous. We had to put in programs that were beneficial for the practice and yet allowed us to be able to finance and take the risks that were appropriate for our approvals. So I just want you to know I touched on it very quickly. I don't want to get into that big soup, but I assure you, this whole thing of earning our reputation and everything with the associations and the watchdogs and dotting the I's and crossing the T's, doctors really don't want to take banking in because they couldn't put enough interest on an account for a patient that would make it worthwhile to bring it in-house.
So true. And so let's talk about some of the resources that you have, because CareCredit has refined this process of putting this information out there and having the conversation and creating the awareness. So talk about some of these things.
Yeah, I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, Fred, mostly because I know that each practice is unique. Even though they have a lot of commonality, they are unique. And so I'm going to give them a recommendation on what to specifically use. I will tell you that our provider locator, we're getting over 500, well over 500,000. I want to make sure that I'm legal when I speak, that well over 500,000 hits a month in patients coming to our site looking for a doctor. Interesting. Over 500,000 coming to CareCredit to find a doctor that they can work with. That being said, as a minimum, a doctor should take advantage and make sure his information is correct on this provider locator. We have financial policies for people that need those things because they're not getting them out of their software management system, which, oh, by the way, what's the best way to process CareCredit? The way that's unique to your practice. Maybe we happen to be in your practice management software system. We have a lot of integrations there. We provide complimentary patient, and all of these services, I don't charge for these, Fred. These are because it's the right thing to do. Patient education materials. They want to do some marketing in their practice. I encourage this. We talked about it earlier. We have these custom apply links, banners, buttons, whatever they want. They're complimentary for us. If we go a little bit farther than that, and we look at some of the additional practice resources, we have a sales team. I have 135 people that all they do today is call on practices, Fred. And those are existing practices, not new sales. They're there to serve the practices for them to refine out and flesh out the opportunity that exists and what products of CareCredit best suit them.
Yeah, and you do have that you can put a payment calculator. They can build it if they have a dynamic website. They can put a widget right in there. I'm going to use online terms. That's a payment calculator, or that they could even apply ahead of time. I mean, that's a great thing to be able for the patient to say, I can actually find out what I can walk into this practice and know what I can afford, so I'm not panicked about it, because people who come to us, they know that they've put their dentistry off. They know they don't just need a cleaning very often. So when they can pre-apply, that's powerful stuff. And then, you have other great tools as well
real quickly to just touch on them, just real quickly. You mentioned the calculator. Yep. There's a reason why we have it for the practice as well as the patient. It's the most used. It's the one that finally puts it in their mind's eye what they're going to be committing to financially. And on the next slide that you had up there, you'll notice that when we're talking to offices, this is something that my sales team actually can do in your practice. Sometimes we provide an impact calculator a situation. What would you like to do more of? How does it hit your overhead? Sometimes practices need this kind of information for them to understand what a great deal they're getting when they're utilizing patient financing, because there is a cost to it. How does it hit their overhead? We'll show them exactly what they're doing and how it works in their practice. The other thing is a performance. That we call it, it's a practice performance review, and if you've seen us at a show, we do a few thousand of these a year at meetings throughout the country. It's because it shows them how they perform in their area. What does their patients in their area look like? What are the average FICOs walking into their door? What is the guy that's down the street that's doing 10% better than he is? What does it look like for him? So we do these with our team members in the practice. We also like to if a doctor wants to hold his team accountable, he's diagnosing $10,000, and the office seems to think that they have 90% acceptance rate. Well, it actually shows what of that $10,000 is being accepted. we talked about certification, and the reason why I was glad you brought it up is certification happens every 2 years. A practice gets certified. Do you think Care Credit really likes to go to a practice and say, hey, we really need you to do some certification? Certification keeps the practice as they grow and change, and as our product grows by demand, because it's very important for us to continue to evolve our product for the needs of a practice. So these are just a few things that people can take advantage of. Some of them are utilized. I'll tell you, the calculator I wouldn't have a conversation without one.
Yeah, of course. You want to sit there and be able to spell it out simply so that somebody can look at it. Every business is doing it. When they sit there and offer financing anywhere, they show you how the payment works. And of course, you've got the digital tools to go with it. So
it's listening to the voice of the customer, Fred. So it was one of those situations where, you know, some people don't carry their credit card. Well, they can in a digital format. Some of them don't want to talk to you when they apply for Care Credit. They're concerned. Great, we give them so that they can apply on their own mobile device. If they didn't have a mobile device with it, because, you know, I read something just recently that 70% of Americans have a smartphone, but let's say they don't. Let's say they don't want to use it.
I think it's 98%, but you know.
Well, that's why we created an iPad for somebody to be able to solution for them to be able to apply by themselves and be in the practice, because you know what, you keep hearing me say be in the practice. Once a patient leaves the practice, you have to work 10 times harder to be able to get them back in to have the treatment they want and need. It is true. And so we work very hard at making sure that we're handling things as a patient, listening to the voice of the customer, how they want to be able to apply, and making sure that that's available within the practice. And last but not least, you know, online bill pay. We created this because doctors can put it on statements. If they're doing electronic statements to their patients, they can click on it and they can go through a portal now and they can pay online to their doctors. This was a new creation because many times after the patient has paid, there might be a small balance after insurance, and they needed a way to be able to take care of that. So we created that as well. That's fairly new out in the market. But I will also say, with all of these tools, the best way for a practice is for them to, how they use Care Credit is for them to come together as a team and cipher out how they can best implement this. Maybe it's in their software. We're integrated there too. So these tools are all there. I'm about to give you the secret sauce of what the most important opportunity is. Remember, I talked about that field team that's out there. They're not there to sell you something. They're there to serve you. And if you would be interested in fleshing out what the best way to work with your practice is, please. This is a complimentary phone number, a complimentary visit, and take advantage of it, because at the end of the day, it's just your practice and your business that you're affecting.
Yeah, and this is where the dentist doesn't have to figure it out or explain it, or the office manager. They just get everybody, get people in there and say, this is how we talk about it. These are the tools we have. These are how you utilize them. They're walking into practices all day long and that are different, and say, okay, this is what we think would work for your practice. And they say, well, we're interested in doing a lot more Invisalign. Okay, great. Let's talk about how we can amplify that using Care Credit, things like that. So it's really important. Now we're going to get to some questions. I got to talk about a couple of events that I want people to know about. I want to thank you, Bet, for doing this, but we've got some questions coming in from people, so we're going to get to them. But I think your message here is really important, and I want to sort of let you speak to this thought.
Well, as I shared with you in the very beginning, for me it boils down to about a patient and what we're willing to do as professionals, our group. This photo happens to be coming from the Speaking and Consulting Network. Linda Miles, for many of you who know her, a great mentor to the profession. That was an award that I received from her. And this award came to me for one reason and one. I'm very passionate about what I do day in and day out. I can look in the mirror and know that the patients that I'm serving, they need the care. And it is the dental team's job to make this happen. And how can they really truly do this? You need to give them the ability for them to choose a range of payment options so that they can get what they want when they need it. So that's been my charge. It's my passion. And I can't thank you enough for letting me share this with you.
Well, I was there when you got that award, and it was the first time that they had given this award, you know, named after the wonderful Linda Miles, who's a pioneer and an icon in the industry, and they talked about your commitment to the success of practices, but also to the treatment of patients. And I think I'm proud to have you as a friend and be associated with you, and very excited that you've participated in this.